Goodman, thanks so much for joining us.
The viewpoints expressed in this program are the opinions of the people expressing them and are not necessarily those of Fresh Air Incorporated, its staff, or its board of directors.
I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today is Tuesday, May 9th, 2023. What a beautiful day. We're about due for some joyous weather, and I think we got it looking at us right now, and we're looking at it, and hopefully you all and we all can get out and enjoy the weather. Well, got a great program, one that I have been looking forward to. We did a version of it earlier. But this is the one that is going to be live to the radio, and we'll be sharing it across our social media platforms as well. I'm pleased to have in today's program, I'll introduce him in a few minutes, Dr. Mahmoud El-Kati, one of the great historians, thinkers, writers, humanist, and philanthropist in our community, a light, and you'll enjoy the conversation. I always say that like everybody else I know, we feel just enlightened and blessed to listen to Brother Mahmoud El-Kati share his stories, his vision, his thought, his analysis, and his passion about ourselves, our people, about culture, about the world, and about he brings us the power of love in the world. Well, before we do that, let me do a couple of things that I call hot topics, kind of things that are on my mind. One of them, local, one national. The national one is about the banking crisis. The public is kind of aware of the recent banking crisis. First Republic Bank became the second biggest bank failure in U.S. history after the lender was seized by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation and sold to J.P. Morgan Chase on May 1st of this year. So First Republic is the latest victim of the panic that's roiled small and mid-sized banks since the failure of Silicon Valley Bank in March of 2023. So the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and now First Republic underscores how the impact of risky decisions at one bank can quickly spread to the broader financial system. Should also provide the impetus for policymakers and regulators to address a systemic problem that has plagued the banking industry from the savings and loan crisis of the 1980s to the financial crisis of 2008 to the recent turmoil following SVP's demise, including incentive structures that encourage excessive risk taking. Well, we're going to talk more about this. What I'm reading is a piece that appears in Inside News this week. It's a piece by a scholar, Alexandra Digby. She's adjunct assistant professor of economics at the University of Rochester, and writing with her, Dolly Davis, associate dean, or she's the associate dean of faculty at Minerva University, and the third person on the writing team is Hiroshi Hatsukami Morgan, assistant professor of social work at Minerva University. So go to the website, check that out. I wanted to call that to your attention because on Thursday, we're going to be presenting a discussion on the impact of banking on our community, but more on the impact we can have on banking. What do you mean, Al McFarlane? Well, got a new friend that I met through the Nubia narrative platform that I'm a part of, and he wrote a fiction piece that is theoretically placing him in front of his grandchildren and describing to them the old way of protest that we oldsters grew up in and that we use to practice our civil rights and human rights work in decades gone past. And he gathers a group of young people with picket signs, and they go to a bank, and they create a line, and they protest bank policy at a particular specific bank. And their strategy is to, as a group, kind of collectively focus in on one bank and create long lines and protest signs, but stop at the door of the bank, and then to walk in the bank and one by one withdraw a portion of their money, take that money and deposit it somewhere else. The idea is that you create public curiosity. And when the media come to you and ask why all of you are here protesting or picketing, what are you complaining about, you say that you have no confidence in the banking system. And they ask it 4 or 5 different ways. Your answer is the same. No confidence in the banking system. That, he says, is the panic button. And that's kind of what this article that I just read talked about, creating what creates panic in the financial sector. And that's what the billionaires, my writer, is saying are afraid of. So how do we come up with a strategy that's rational, that's practical, that's teaching, that is demonstrable, that leverages our small dollars in the public fishbowl, public arena, in a way that we can create the possibility of a concern that is massive and broad about banking practices or economic practices or political practices that threaten the economic stability of the system unless we get the change we want. So that's going to be a good conversation. That'll be this Thursday. The second hot topic today is one that is close to home. And unfortunately, this is a story from the Associated Press by Trisha Ahmed. The headline says that U.S. prosecutors are going to charge a Minneapolis man for suspected arson at a couple of mosques. The story says a man suspected of setting fires to Minneapolis mosque was indicted Thursday last week on federal charges of arson and damage to religious property, while investigators look into a series of crimes targeting Muslims and Somali Americans. This man, Jackie Ram Little, 36 years old, was indicted by a federal grand jury for the April 24th fire at the Masjid al-Rahma Mosque. Authorities are also investigating him as a suspect in the fire that damaged the Masjid Omar Islamic Center inside a Somali shopping mall on April 23rd, as well as the January vandalism of U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar's Minneapolis office and of a Somali American police officer's vehicle, among other crimes. That all according to U.S. Attorney Andy Lugar. Lugar's statements at a press conference last week. Well, that's enough to think about, and I always think about what it means. It seems like there's an escalation of vitriol, escalation, a brazenness of anger and I don't know the right words for it. We'll get into that, but there's more of it seems. And there's 2 ways to look at it. And I take this from my guest, Dr. Mahmoud El-Kati. On the one hand, as ugly as it is, at its ugliest, it's simply a sign that things are about to change and that we should take courage, take heart, because when they go into the desperate mode, it means they're clinging for straws, grasping for straws, and they really fear, and they've lost already in their own minds, and they are struggling to maintain some sense of place and control and equity, which they don't have and don't own. So we'll talk about that. Let's bring in Dr. Mahmoud El-Kati. I wanted to start by saying, Brother Mahmoud, as always, good to see you. Thank you for being here. And as for the audience today here on KFAI, I want to say that my goal is to be a good listener, and I'll be a proxy listener for the thousands of listeners on KFAI, asking questions where I can to help clarify and for you to go deep on things that you want to go deep on. But thank you, brother, for being here. And 2 of the things we want to talk about for sure the recent transition of two elders. One, brother Harry Belafonte, just transitioned into ancestorhood, and before that, our brother Randal Robinson. And I'll just leave it there. Good afternoon, brother.
Yeah, yeah, don't leave it there, please. Hey, it's always good to be with you, El. You know that you're doing the work that needs to be done. So, and keep on doing what you're doing. You're a treasure to our community, and it's paying off, I think. In certain quarters, it's immediately paying off. But anyway, this, yes, I want to talk a bit about one of the great spirits that's ever appeared in our experience as a people. And people are spirits too. We're not just flesh and bone. That's true. And he was a great spirit. So was Randal Robinson. And they were akin too, because they worked together around Trans-Africa. Harry Belafonte, to me, is one of, there are only a few, one of the wisest human beings I have ever listened to. I said, he's a wise man. And when I saw him, he could have been in his mid-30s, thereabouts. And I saw him 3 times in my life. Never heard him perform. I never went to a concert, anything like that. But to hear him talk / lectures, / tell stories about his life. I mean, it's a deep spiritual thing to listen to him. He's a wise man, I'm saying that. Not smart, not just smart, but wise. Anybody can be smart. I can be smart if I knew how to be a mechanic, at something. I could be a smart guy, That's not wisdom, okay? Yeah, I could be an engineer, really smart, and know every trick of the trade. Wisdom transcends that. It's transcendent knowledge, like Holy Writ, like script. That's what wisdom is. So it's different. Thank you. From knowledge. From knowledge, knowledge can be here today and gone tomorrow. I want to give our audience a simple definition of what we call knowledge. And then that knowledge is simply information organized for use. That's what it is. It's organized. Yeah. The knowledge what you call knowledge may not be beneficial to you. For instance, much of knowledge in the West and what covers our experience in this country is not beneficial to us. Much of it, some of it has to be. We have our own knowledge box too, which is African and suppressed. But knowledge is the what we call now the curriculum that you study in school through grade school, high school, college, and so forth. That's the curriculum. That's what you call the University of Minnesota. They talk about it being the house of knowledge, all these fantastic terms they use to describe it. But knowledge is not forever. I mean, the knowledge of a doctor and say, well, like, a better example of Copernicus and Galileo, their knowledge base was not the same as Einstein. He knew much more than they knew because knowledge had advanced. There were new discoveries and so forth, and there was no theory of relativity until he showed it on. So that's new knowledge. Well, Black people create knowledge all the time. The sad fact is it's not organized. That's the problem. It's there. You got deep treasures of knowledge. And that's what Harry Belafonte had. I've never listened to anybody who was more arresting. Almost every other word he had to say was significant.
Hmm.
So I think, first of all, he was a wise man, and I was endeared to him because I believe, as I do, he loved Black people. There's no question about that. Don't get into people's personal thing. He loved Black people. And so do I. I think that's why I loved him. And we're not talking about nonsense, European nonsense, about race and that kind of thing, because it's transcendent. And Black people, I love Black people because they deserve to be loved.
Let me jump in here. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. My guest, the venerable, the honorable Mahmoud El-Kati, Dr. Mahmoud El-Kati. We call him Professor. I call him the griot. He's a historian, a writer, a publisher, published author, and a mentor to so many here in the community and around the country. And we're talking about two people that have just made transition as a point of departure, even in our conversation. And first, obviously, the recent departure or transition of the great Harry Belafonte. I'm so happy to hear you make the distinction between being a man of knowledge and a wise man, and both are important. They both, but there's a difference.
Yes.
And I'm happy to hear you declare the presence of and the creation, the innovation of knowledge in Black people, but recognizing the challenge of organizing the knowledge. And when you were saying knowledge, I said knowledge. My question to you is, in the general public, knowledge to what end? What's the purpose of it?
Yeah. Okay. We got that out of the way. The wisdom and knowledge, distinct realities in human life. But two things. When I talk about Harry Belafonte, you're trying to talk about five things at once. He's that. What should I start? I said I saw him 3 times. Never saw him perform. Of course, I read things about him and all his sense. But he was indeed a Renaissance man in some ways, like his mentor, who was Paul Robeson. And the mission was, Paul Robeson taught him, an artist must be responsible to his community. An artist does not see things as they are, but things as they ought to be, and try to make it happen. And he's passed that tradition to Danny Glover today, is his mentee. Those two men love one another. I saw them, just like he loved Paul Robeson. And that was good. He sees that mission. He said, Paul Robeson told him to be loyal to your convictions. And that's what that guy has done. The Paul Robeson thing, the mentee-mentor relationship was powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And he carried it out in his life. He was an artist because Robeson told him, you got to be responsible to your community. And he's done that writ large in multiple ways. So then I like to, little niches. I'm going to talk kind of, here and there. And
sure.
Snatches of stuff. It's
sure.
A theme. But there's so much to talk about this guy. And he's such a beautiful man. And another person I've got to mention in conjunction with him is Sidney Poitier, because they're comparable and super. Sidney Poitier was smart. Mm-hmm. Okay. But he wasn't quite wise like Harry. I mean, a brilliant guy, And they came from scanty backgrounds. Let me say something about he and Sidney. They're both island boys. Thank God for island boys. Black Americans on the mainland, that's all we are. On the mainland, this is the islands, and we're on the mainland. There's no difference. Okay. These island boys, two of the greatest spirits that ever appeared in American life and theater and movies and stuff like that. But they They have very arresting backgrounds. Most people think Harry Belafonte was born in Jamaica. He wasn't. He was born in Harlem. He's a Harlem guy. People. Then he went back. His mother took him back to Jamaica for a number of years, and he came back when he was about 10 years old. And then, so he's a New Yorker, you know, and a Jamaican background. He has his heritage is very complicated. We won't get into that. But he was the common denominator was he was black. You should know that straight up. Sidney Poitier came. Those guys were born within 8 days of each other. I think Sidney Poitier called him the old man in public. He said, "This old guy, I don't want to sit next to him." You know? They were great friends, a great marriage of friendship. Poitier, people think, you know, he's from the islands. He wasn't born there. He's born in Miami. They were bringing him to Miami. They thought he was the eighth of 8 children to be. And how he came to be born in Miami is they thought he wouldn't make it. He would die. And that's why they came to Miami with a shoebox ready to bear him. And in some miraculous way, his life was preserved, and he grew up and went back to the islands, to Cat Island, which is not the main thing in Nassau. You know, Nassau is cosmopolitan and all that. His daddy was a tomato farmer and brought his product to the mainland. And Poitier remembers when he first saw some things on the Miami moving, and when they were getting near shore, and he wasn't quite sure what it was. And he asked his mother, "What are those things, you know, moving like that?" He said, "Those are cars, automobiles." He was 10 years old before he saw an automobile. You didn't know what it was.
That's it.
That's amazing. But anyway, these two spirits, they grew up together. They were both mentored by Paul Robeson, but Harry Belafonte became the Paul, carrying the dispensation more so than Sidney's. Sidney was helpful too, but he was not out front, in your face, freedom fighter. Harry was that. Nobody can deny him that. He might have given as much, well, certainly materially given much as anybody to the civil rights movement. Millions of dollars, you know. He financed the SNCC. He financed a trip to Student Nonviolent Minority Committee to visit about 8 African countries. That's why they were so hip. He underwrote that. And so what's this? So SNCC people know him. Every civil rights organization respected him. And he had this is a special moment when he met Dr. King at Abyssinia Baptist Church in Harlem, shortly after King had emerged into national prominence. And they met in Abyssinia Baptist Church, Admiral Clayton Powell's church. Once the largest congregation in America, 10,000 members, before these big
mega churches.
Yeah, mega churches. Yeah, it was in Harlem. What was his name? Abyssinia, you know, there's Africa, right? Where's Abyssinia in Africa? That's what was fun. There it is.
You know what, Mahmoud? If you lean into the camera, I get you because your voice is faint
I don't
and way
have
back.
a very
Yeah,
powerful voice. I keep forgetting that. So how's it now?
it's perfect. Yeah.
There's so many stories. But one of the stories, he talks about he and Sidney Poitier met at the National Negro Theater back in the 30s in Harlem.
Okay.
That's where the career started. And um, and they came into this Negro ensemble theater where it was black actors and back there then, and where he met later the great two other people, um, Ruby Dee and
Aussie.
yeah, Ozzie Davis and Ruby Dee. They were old friends.
Mhm.
And Sidney came there. So they were young men. Sidney came to New York with what amounts to about 2 years of formal training. Sidney did. Had a thick accent. He couldn't put rocks in his mouth to help him get rid of it and all of that. And but both of these spirits were driven spirits. The hell with odds. I'm coming. Both of them. This guy who couldn't, could barely speak the English language, barely had a formal education around above second grade, taught himself to read, or was taught by a waiter, one of the black waiters. This is Loved Black Love. There it is. He was taught by various people. And then he got rid of the accent and all of that. And he and Harry were in this group of black actors in the 1930s in Harlem. And they were, Harry Belafonte said when he first saw him, before we became friends, he saw him, he was in the lineup, to get a shot at acting. And he said he looked at this guy, he said, what makes this guy thinks he can be an actor? he said the very thing happened. And what happened was he was a janitor. Harry Belafonte was a janitor at the theater. And this particular night, of course, he had to work. He, hold every nickel. He could hold a nickel to the eagle grin. And he couldn't miss work because his work conflicted with a role he had been given. Some old throwaway European play, reinvented by black people. And so he said, I can't do it tonight. He said, his manager, I got to work, about to have a family and stuff. And so they needed a substitute. So Sidney took the part. And he said, at the same time, Hollywood was looking for a Negro actor. This is real. Mm-hmm. And they were in New York, Sleazek and all of those guys looking. And they came to this Negro ensemble, this theater, and Sidney substituted for Harry. and in this little throwaway European play. And Sleazek, or whoever the great Hollywood man was, took Sidney to Hollywood. That's
his gig.
And to Sidney to Hollywood. Now get this. The first movie that Sidney made was called No Way Out. I remember that. I was living in Miami then. This is in 1950. And I'll never forget, if you look at that movie, it was a groundbreaker, because if you've seen it, it was a non-stereotypical role in 1950. Mm-hmm. And Sidney played opposite a great actor named Richard Widmark, who was a stomped down to earth, hope to die white supremacist. Mm-hmm. Think about that. And Sidney was the psychiatrist. He was the guy who there's some volatile scenes. He was called all kinds of names by Richard Widmark and so forth. And it ultimately ended up in black people revolting. So it was a little minor skirmish, not like they are now. But think of that. the first movie he made transcended, being funny or stupid or ignorant or all these stereotypes, the Stephen Fletcher type thing was predominant. Sidney, his first full-length movie was a revolutionary act. Like I don't know if you've ever seen that movie.
Nope.
No, please see it. No Way Out. You'll see what I'm talking about. Anyway, so Sidney became the great movie star, and Harry wanted to be the actor, and he was downtown. He used to go hang out with musicians. Lester Young, Charlie Parker, young, rising Miles Davis. In fact, he said that Lester Young is the one to encourage him to sing. He said, "You an actor?" He said, "I'm an actor." He said, "Well, you ought to be able to sing something." And so he started out in the little clubs. He once fronted the band led by Charlie Parker. And they were like a brotherhood. He loved those musicians and so forth. This is what led him into music. First, he was doing these little American things. Mm-hmm. And then as he grew, he thought about his background, his Jamaican background, and the music that he heard there, and all of that. And he was kind of dancing in some of this stuff, all of that. And then he just discovered, his Jamaican heritage, the songs he heard when the banana boat and all of that, man. And then he affected it. He was a Jamaican, got rid of his accent, got it back. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows the banana song. You can't be on the planet and not know that song. You can't, not because you do. And he put Caribbean music on the map. Yep. Pre Bob Marley, as great as he was. Yep. Harry was first. Yep. He had everybody.
The whole world, yeah.
Like, yeah. Oh, they're going there.
And yes. He was such a charismatic. I mean,
he was charismatic. He had the charisma
on TV and on film.
Yeah, he's a first multimedia star. Mm-hmm. Yeah, stage, screen, television, performance, radio. The first one. He's the first artist to sell 1 million albums. Mm-hmm. Think about that. It wasn't Bing Crosby, Frank Sinatra. It was he in the 1950s. And he spun off of the idioms from Jamaica mm-hmm. into other forms of music, to Negro spirituals, and so he embraced that and everything. He was a monster.
His Deo song, as I think about that, reminds me, the next iteration of that for me was Miriam Makeba singing, what was her song? I can't remember the name of the song now, but she did the folk songs in South Africa that brought a pristine authenticity, right? A clear, and that's what Belafonte did as well. He brought like crystal clear a bell-like sound of meaning and of warmth, and of everything else that went into that experience that he was describing, both its pain, but also its joy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, he introduced Miriam Makeba to America, and of all places, in Atlanta, Georgia first. Okay. That's where they did it in Atlanta, Georgia. And then she had a huge following among Pan-Africanists mm-hmm. With the boot dance on Ed Sullivan's show. We couldn't wait. She appeared on Ed Sullivan's show at least a half a dozen times. That's before Olatunji Babatunde and his Drums of Passion. That's my friend. He's gone too. But he introduced drumming. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it spread, after everybody's seen Babatunde. And I might say that Babatunde was a friend of the way, North Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
He visited there with us, and we became friends. He's a Alantunji Babatunde and his drums of passion. And
A side story, Gary Hines was on here talking about how he was walking across some plaza, I think in Ghana, and Babatunde was there, or maybe he was somewhere else, but he had met Babatunde, I think from here, right at the way,
yeah,
and Babatunde remembered him and said, "Hey, you're the same guy." So that's small world.
small world. Yeah, yeah. But there's so many stories to tell about Harry. Well, the thing is, he was a movie star. He played in that movie called Island with John Fontaine, where they never lovers who never touch one another. Yeah, Island in the Sun. That was a full length, 20th century big time movie. He made, but eventually he got fed up with the Hollywood system and started producing his own movies. He made 5 or 6 of his own. The one I remember was Claude in the Flesh or something like that. But he produced and helped organize the artists, Paul Newman and those guys, to produce their own films, their artists. He was involved in that too. But he was a Pan-Africanist to the bone.
Switch, if you would, Brother Mahmoud. And on that note, as a Pan-Africanist, talk about the other elder that transitioned, that's Randal Robinson. And I think another significant spirit and mind and a presence that remains with us forever, I believe. But what are your thoughts on his contribution, his work, his life?
Oh, they were friends. He was a founder and supporter of Trans-Africa, which was founded by Randal Robinson, and they worked together on a number of issues. And I'm convinced, I'm sure that Harry was also on the board. And again, raised money. He raised money for everybody. Everybody. And Trans-Africa had a good 20-year run. Randal Robinson, we had him here as a guest, if you remember, at Lucille's Kitchen. Yeah, eat that. It's gone.
Yeah.
Good piece of history. But and we had him here for 3 or 4 days. Randal Robinson. He was a gentleman, a very imposing man, and I guess you could say scholarly. If anybody can you be scholarly looking? He's got. And he was a good presenter. He dressed the McAllister audience there. We introduced him. And he put, Randal Robinson is important because he put the reparations question back in the ball game. Is it with the book, The Debt? This is what we're talking about. This is 20 years ago. The debt was it's still one of the best things I've ever read on reparations. And he even outlined how he thought reparations should be. It shouldn't be individualized and everybody get a $40,000 check. He said, no, you know where that's going to end up. It won't progress. We make no progress. He said, no, it's institutions. He said, we got to build economic institutions, educational institutions, healthcare institutions, anything that contributes to the uplift of the whole people, and not individualized checks, because that's not going anywhere. We got to build some banks to put the checks in. So I still think his is the best plan, and other people have good plans too. I'm saying, but because that's what it's about, man. We have enough knowledge and all of these backgrounds that other human beings have. We are older than most nations in the United Nations as a people. Black people in this United States been together longer than the 203 nations, United Nations. It just happened. Bangladesh, that just happened. They're not as much. They don't have as much experience of togetherness in culture and language and music as as most of those nations. And I remember teaching in a class at McAllister when I was talking about explaining people to when the Bangladesh thing was happening and how Bangladesh had to come into being and they were fighting for the nationality and so forth. And I had a student in there who I thought was Bangladesh. And she said, Professor, you got to understand, I'm not Bangladesh. That's artificial. I'm from the bamboo people. That's a part of, again, Bangladesh is a state, like the state of the United States in Washington. That's a state. A nation state is what the United States is. It's not a genuine nation like Native American nations, which is created by history. Nation states are created by, it's artificial. It is created on paper. Why is the United States is among the youngest nations in the world with the oldest written constitution. That's most states now have written constitution. Came after it. But we are older than the United States of America. If we talking about before the Mayflower or whatever you want to talk about, 1619, that's before America was invented. We were forming a national consciousness under slaveocracy. And you can tell of people who are people, really are people, by their music. By the oldest, and I'm going to leave out our indigenous brothers and sisters because they were put out of the state. Their land was taken away from them and carved out of 13 colonies and put them on something reservation. Reservation has nothing to do with Native American culture.
Right.
And they would be the first to tell you that. So we're talking about Black people who are trapped in a nation state, not a nation created by history and culture, but an artificial nation which is imposed over land. And this artificial creation was created between the Atlantic and the Mississippi Valley. The 13 colonies became a nation state, and it's written on paper. Well, what I'm talking about now is the kind of things that Harry would be talking about. He would explain all that kind of stuff. I mean, how nations are formed, how they relate to one another and all. I mean, he was a wise man. I'm telling you, way beyond being smart. I hope y'all get that right, because we have a lot of smart Black people. Let me tell you that right now. I've been around them. I'm telling you, most of my life, my adult life, I've been spent around very smart people, and that took a long time for me to make a distinction between being wise and being smart.
Yeah.
But it's gift. I mean, we got so many gifts and so much, and the thing of what we call American music. It's nobody smarter. We want to do it over and over again. Any innovation, we make it. We change American culture through our music. Everything, you can call it whatever you're talking about. Ragtime, you're talking about Black people. The Roaring Twenties, you're talking about Black people music. Swing, you're talking about Black people music.
Bebop.
Rock and roll, bebop, you're talking about Black people music. All of it comes from Black folk. Now, don't throw a bottle at the screen, some white supremacists, because you control. But this is what you got to face. That Black people, in certain ways, are more American than anybody who's been president. Their roots are deeper. They've been in more wars than most people who call themselves white. They have, as a culture, they were formed in this country. Harry Belafonte could articulate that. I mean,
but not just in this country, formed in the hemisphere.
In the hemisphere.
Differently, right? I wanted to use that to ask you to pivot to bring into this question what you called, when we last talked, the most significant event in modern history, and that was the revolution in Haiti.
Yeah.
And the way you explained it was eye-opening for me, because you gave it a context of why it was so important in the history of political and human development. And it's in alignment with what you're talking about, the spiritual and cultural work of Randall Robinson and Harold Belafonte. They all stem from the same consciousness.
He talked about that. And of course, Randall was viscerally tied to the people of Haiti. You know, he gave his life to people. He almost died from a fast that he went into for a number of days. I mean, maybe 2 weeks without any water and food, to draw attention to the Haitian question, you know, how it's been isolated, but it's been invaded twice by the United States Marine. The last time in 1934, it was isolated by the Western world, barricaded. And so even Iran was a part of that scheme of because Haitian people, Du Bois called it, and I'll keep saying, Du Bois called Haitian Revolution anyway, amounted to, and don't have the right words, but it's an insult, or it's unforgivable blackness. That's what they called Haiti, because it had beaten the most powerful army in the world. Napoleon, a white army, when white supremacy is almost unmatched at its peak of conquering people and making everybody bow and speak their language and so forth. The Haitians stopped that and created a democracy. So it was certainly a genuine revolution. The United States is just an independent movement. It's an independent movement. A genuine revolution replaces a system with a new system. That didn't happen in America. Slavery was before the American Revolution, and it got worse after with the slave codes. So this is not a revolution. America, they got the right dates, call it Independence Day. It's independent from British monarchy, but it's not a revolution. A revolution is a complete change of one system to another. Like Tsarism in Russia was replaced by what? Communism. You have Mao Zedong, put down the old guard and brought in a new guard under communism, and it happened in North Korea, and 90 miles from home, it happened in Castro. He put the gangsters and the mafia out of Cuba under Fulgencio, who was a crook partner. Everybody, Afro-Cubans couldn't do anything before Castro but dance and sing and shine shoes. It's not what it should be now, but I credit Castro for this. When Cuba gained when the revolution came, this is revolutionary language. He said, I want everybody to know that Cuba is an Afro-Latino culture. Because that's what it is. We call it Spanish.
Colombia, Venezuela.
My daughter just got back from Colombia because of people on the islands there. She's hanging out with them. But so and revolutions rename things. You see, you name things. That's what was so scary in the 60s, and Harry was a part of this. And the Black people made a transition that I don't think they realized how important it was psychically, mentally, when the movement from being a Negro to a Black man to an African American. That is significant in the process of revolutionary change. That's just, I'm not a Negro. No Negro live in Africa. They are now, and they've never been, and we never heard anybody. And the Native American has told me over and over again, I'm not an Indian. I'm Choctaw, I'm Chickasaw, whatever. That's who I am. Some language, land, so forth. Can't name me an Indian, especially if they're named Indians and they're not in India.
Right.
Yeah, very, very, it's very recent in history, human history, that people have named land. People have named Indians, especially if they're named Indians and they're not in India. Very recent in history, human history, that people have named land. People have named Indians, especially if they're named Indians and they're not in India. Very recent in history, human history, that people have named land. People have named land. people have named themselves after land. Now, you look at the nations in Africa or the Native American people here. They were, the Arawaks were the Arawaks. And it's a land at the islands. And you have the people in Haiti were a different land form. Oh, and when Jacques Dessalines came to the fore, he gave Haiti its original name. Because when the Spanish conquered it, they called it Hispaniola. And the French took it from the Spanish, and they called it Saint-Domingue. When Jacques Dessalines came to power, he said, you're going to spell it, we're going to pronounce it the way the indigenous people, the Plainate people, Haiti, Haiti, Haiti. That's the name of it. He gave Haiti back to the Native Americans.
Great.
Yeah, wasn't it something? Yeah, that's a revolution.
It makes a difference, and I always remember you, Professor Mahmoud, talking about the power of language as well, and about words, what words mean. And one of the things that I've been doing, and I owe this to you and others, is just continually thinking about how we use words, what words mean in our lives, and how words reflect and also give us power. And what does that mean? And so what I've taken to is in recent year or so is studying hieroglyphics and learning, the Medu Neter, right? The Middle Egyptian language system that comes out of Kemet, and that is the basis for what is being called an Africana way of knowing, a way of assembling the universe.
Absolutely.
But you talk about words a lot, and what we as humans are able to do and do through words, why words make us unique. What are your thoughts?
Well, words can create things that don't exist. Like race. I don't mean race horse. I'm talking about race of people. That doesn't exist. Because you use a word, you imagine that there's a corresponding reality to the word. See, you say a car, an automobile, there's a corresponding reality. When you say race, there's no corresponding reality to that. We are a species, yes, which comes in varieties. You have 11 basic needs, 4 basic wishes, however you want to define it. That's the species. But you have a word called race, and it doesn't exist as such. So you said the black race, the brown race, the yellow race, and so that means everything about you. Covers but the biological and the cultural. It's not true. And more people understand. Harry could talk about this. Oh God, he could talk about race. That people. He says people are named for land, for language. This is a Harry Belafonte lesson. For language, Swahili. No, not your color. He said, how can I prove it? I can take you to Europe and take you to Africa. And there are different peoplehoods there. When I'm in Europe, I meet Dutch, French, Europe. In Europe, I don't meet a white man. They didn't tell you he's white. I'm Dutch, I'm French, and French you're German. I'm German. Yeah, color. There's no white language. There's no such thing. There's German language. There's Irish. There's Anglo-Saxon. But there's no language. See, that's what I mean about myth and race. And the thing about a myth is it can be just a little bitty thing, a fact. And because of that fact, you can build mythology, things that are untrue. Why you look at me and say I'm a black man. Everybody, you can see it's black. Well, automatically, you start with the intellectual, you say, well, he's dumb. You took biology and imposed it over culture. Well, that I'm black is a biological fact. but I can speak any language any human learn to speak it, any human being speak, and I do nothing. My color won't change. I can speak Chinese. Paul Robeson, for instance, mastered 20 different languages.
Yeah.
Right? He thinks, okay, he could speak in Chinese, several of the Scandinavian tongues, all the major Western languages. Paul Robeson could speak them and fluently sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the Slavic languages, he could do the phonetic thing. He's the massive, same color, black man, all these things. Those are cultural realities.
Sure.
That culture is learned behavior. You learn to be who you are through the people around you. That's what culture is. Some people think culture is race. Race ain't culture, and culture ain't race. One is a biological fact. The other is learned behavior, and it's shared from generation to generation. That's what makes a Black American different from other people. I'm an African person. I'm African by roots, and people ask me, well, where are you from? Well, originally or previously? Where do you want to go?
One of the words that I always use when I'm talking about you, Professor Mahmoud, is the epiphany when I heard you at Lucille's Kitchen talk about the word remember. And you broke it down. You said, we all say, remember this, I forgot, I remember, if I got to remember. But what about remembering? Remembering as in putting back together that which was dismembered.
Dismembered, yeah.
Gives you a whole new way of looking at the world. And you look at then our culture, our history, our story, our narrative, intentionally dismembered. And now we discover the capacity to remember, to build again that which was lost, decimated, attempted to be destroyed, but it has a resilience and a life within it that is unquenchable. That's what I think. Brother Mahmoud, we are at the end of this hour. It goes so quickly, but I want to do this again because I think there's, every thought, every idea gives you a runway to just review and reflect and analyze and to teach. And that's what I think is critically important. And that's what I want to thank you for taking the time today to do. And let's plan to do it again, just to keep this conversation going.
Well, I want to thank you again for Al for doing what you're doing. You're part of the process, buddy.
Sir.
We're getting there. And part of the process is persistence.
Yep. Yeah. I'm going to be sharing this conversation momentarily to my colleagues and friends, the Nubians, in the narrative Nubian experience. So I'm hoping that as the people, sisters and brothers there get a chance to learn and hear your voice, we'll get some response, reaction, and some growing that we can do with each other, building a future that reflects our sense of our role in the creation and our responsibility, our stewardship with everything else that exists in the planet and in the world.
Well put.
All right.
I couldn't say it any better. Yes, well put.
Right. Well, listen, I'm going to sign out right there, Brother Mahmoud. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We're here online every day, but here on KFAI every Tuesday. And we thank you, the listeners on KFAI, those who are online with us. Help us grow this. Go over to YouTube Insight Channel, subscribe, support us, let us know where you are, and be part of this rich, robust conversation. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time.